New data shows the overwhelming majority of Afghans trying to come into the U.S. on humanitarian grounds have been rejected. Statistics from U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services show more than 46,000 Afghans have submitted parole requests to the agencies since July 2021. Of those fully adjudicated applicants, less than 300 have been approved. That's a denial rate of around 90%. The bulk of parole requests have still not been resolved. So CBS News immigration reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez is here now. And Camilo, I know you've been doing so much reporting on this. It's good to see you. Why are so many Afghan refugees submitting parole requests instead of seeking asylum through the U.S. refugee system? Can you kind of explain the differences between those two?
Hi, Caitlin. Yes, when the Taliban took control of Afghanistan last summer, the U.S. was forced to stage this massive operation to evacuate U.S. citizens, but also Afghans who were determined to be at risk of being persecuted by the Taliban, including because of their ties to the U.S. Eventually, more than 70,000 of those Afghan evacuees were resettled here in the U.S., but because of the chaos surrounding the evacuations last summer, and because of the fact that they only lasted for about 2 weeks, the U.S. was obviously not able to evacuate all the Afghans who could potentially be eligible for U.S. resettlement and who could be at risk of persecution by the Taliban. And many of these Afghans, Caitlin, who were left behind, started filing applications for a U.S. immigration benefit known as parole, which allows immigrants to bypass the refugee and visa process and to come here to the U.S. much more quickly if they have urgent humanitarian needs. Now we know that more than 46,000 of these Afghans have filed humanitarian parole requests with the U.S. government. But as you mentioned, over 90% of the applications from Afghans that have been adjudicated have been rejected by the U.S. And unlike the refugee process, which typically takes years to complete and which requires applicants to be in a third country, once somebody has parole, Caitlin, they can come to the U.S. immediately.
Oh, interesting. I mean, that denial rate is really striking. What is the government saying about why so many of these applications from Afghans have been denied or remain unresolved?
Yeah, I think it's important to just highlight these numbers again. We've seen more than 46,000 Afghans apply for humanitarian parole since last summer. Fewer than 5,000 of those applications have actually been adjudicated, and 93% of those applications have been denied. The Department of Homeland Security says that one of the reasons, Caitlin, that many of these applications remain pending is because the department is usually able to accommodate about 2,000 applications per year, not tens of thousands of requests. It has also cited the fact that about 70% of the requests from Afghans have come from people living in Afghanistan. And right now, there is no U.S. embassy or consulate there where these folks can undergo in-person interviews, which are required for parole applications. So this is one of the reasons that the Department of Homeland Security has cited for the very high numbers of denials, but also of pending applications.
And as we're talking about all of these numbers, what I find so critical about your reporting, and our viewers can go to cbsnews.com and read your piece on this, is that you talk to and discuss and talk about the humans behind these numbers, those left behind and those trying to work through this process. So I think that's just so important, the reporting that you've been doing. I'm curious also, how has the Biden administration been using this parole process that you described for other nations, like Ukraine, for example?
Well, that's a key question, Caitlin. Advocates have certainly accused the Biden administration of treating these Afghans differently than other refugee populations, including the Ukrainians who have fled Russia's invasion. Only 2 months after Russia invaded Ukraine, the U.S. created this program called Uniting for Ukraine that allows U.S. individuals, such as organizations and citizens, to sponsor Ukrainians who have been displaced by the war. And so far, we've seen 11,000 of those Ukrainians arrive here to the U.S. under that program. unlike parole requests for Afghans and other populations, the applications for this Uniting for Ukraine program are free. Usually, Afghans have to pay $575 per application, and other populations have to as well. So advocates are saying that Afghans should have access to the same process that Ukrainian refugees are being afforded. But the Department of Homeland Security, Caitlin, says that these populations have different characteristics and circumstances, and one of the differences that they've argued distinguishes these populations is that they believe, for the most part, that many of these Ukrainians will only seek to stay here on a temporary basis until they can return home, but they believe most Afghans are looking for permanent resettlement.
That is a lot of money, especially when you're in a desperate situation. Camilo, before I let you go, I know you've also been reporting on that record-breaking level of migrant apprehensions along the U.S.-Mexico border. What is the status of that? What more can you tell us?
Yeah, Caitlin, we're seeing unprecedented levels of migrant apprehensions along the U.S.-Mexico border that are posing major logistical, humanitarian, and political challenges for the Biden administration. In May, U.S. Border Patrol agents recorded 222,000 migrant apprehensions. That is an all-time monthly high. Some of those apprehensions are of migrants who are crossing multiple times, but these numbers are still very high. And what is critically important to note, Caitlin, is that we're seeing a seismic demographic shift in the migrants who are arriving in the U.S.-Mexico border. In May, nearly 50% of the migrants who entered U.S. border custody were from countries outside of Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. They're from countries like Venezuela, Cuba, even Russia, and other countries in the Western Hemisphere and across the world. And unlike migrants from Central America and Mexico, the U.S. has a much more difficult time deporting migrants to these far-flung countries because of strained diplomatic relationships with countries like Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua, but also because they're farther away, and there's a much significant increase in the distance in which these deportation flights have to travel. So I think one of the key questions ahead, Caitlin, is whether these border arrivals will decrease in the hot summer months, as is typically the case historically, but we saw the record levels of migrant apprehensions last year defy those patterns.
Very interesting, and of course something to keep an eye on as it becomes a political issue. Thank you so much, Camilo, for your reporting and for sharing it with us. We thank you.
Thanks, Caitlin.